This is a video in response to the images of police assaulting students I've been seeing lately. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. Firstly, many of the tactics that you're seeing the police use against these students and other protesters for the past 15 years or so come directly from Israel. That one, hopefully, you'll be seeing a lot more in the coming weeks. I haven't really dove into the online discourse, but the United States has been sending law enforcement to Israel since the Bush Jr. era, and obviously, U.S. law enforcement didn't really need to go overseas to learn how to be evil. They have their roots in the slave patrols, and there's nothing new about police assaulting protesters. But all the same, they have been going to Israel to learn how to subjugate their fellow Americans the IDF way. There's a report by the groups Jewish Voices for Peace and Researching the American-Israeli Alliance called Deadly Exchange, outlining all of this in more detail. Specifically, how the IDF and American law enforcement exchange new and exciting ways to suppress protests and punish civilians. I'm quoting here, "This entails seeing protests not as a right, but rather as a security threat that must be dealt with through repressive police violence. This framing normalizes a complete intolerance of protests in defiance of the First Amendment." There are chapters on racial profiling, surveillance, and use of force. They talk about stuff like the use of skunk water, a crowd control spray developed in Israel to be used against Palestinians. We recently saw this used in January of 2024 in the United States against protesters at Columbia University. The section on racial profiling mentions that stop and frisk became legal police practice in Israel in 2016 after they were directly inspired by the NYPD's use of the tactic. The report is from 2018, but I found the information in it to still be incredibly relevant today, in some ways more so. Again, it's called Deadly Exchange, and I'll link it on my YouTube page. I'm sure others are doing this, but I just wanted to highlight the direct connection between the IDF and what they do and what United States popos do. Secondly, I wanted to play this Kwame Ture quote from back when he was still Stokely Carmichael.
Dr. King's policy was that nonviolence would achieve the gains for black people in the United States. His major assumption was that if you are nonviolent, if you suffer, your opponent will see your suffering and will be moved to change his heart. That's very good. He only made one fallacious assumption. In order for nonviolence to work, your opponent must have a conscience. The United States has none.
That was from 1967 in Stockholm, Sweden. You notice the crowd laughs at the end, but it's true. The compassion has been trained out of the controlling portion of the United States, just like Israel. When images of brutality and excessive force are shared online, the response isn't, "Let's do something about that brutality." The response is, "Let's do something about those images." That was happening in the 1960s as well. The graphic images of the Vietnam War were being shown on network news, and it changed the way Americans viewed that conflict. As a result, President Nixon started limiting the press's access in Vietnam. The final section before the conclusion of that Deadly Exchange report, by the way, is all about using mass media as a tool of the state. It's enough to make you feel like you're in one of those Dr. Manhattan memes. We give boomers a whole lot of shit. Roasting boomers put me on the map. But plenty of boomer activists back then could see the futility in some of what they were doing, and they still did it anyway, and I'm truly beginning to understand what that must have felt like. So, before the outro, where I try to be positive, I'd like to play one more quote from another boomer icon, Peter Fonda in Easy Rider.
We blew it. Good night, man.
Well said. I didn't want this to be a long video. I just wanted to explain the connection between the IDF and US law enforcement. I wanted to recommend the study Deadly Exchange, and I wanted to play that Kwame quote. I have a longer script about this in the works, but it's less informative and more of a thought piece, so it was important that I do this as well. I just quit a part-time job where they overworked me, so I'm just trying to get caught up. I recently read this study, and it made me think about what Kwame said, and I encourage you to get those ideas out there as well. You could share this video, you could share the study, you could share the quotes, you could share your own thoughts on all of this. This isn't a pop culture channel. This is not a political channel. It's a channel about pointing out things that you might otherwise miss, things that I would like to be common knowledge. I want to thank my patrons. I'm back. I quit that job. I thought there would be some kind of balance, but there wasn't. So I wound up in a really dark place in a matter of weeks, and I had to quit. I still really don't even know how to do that job. It's all for the best. I have a lot to talk about, and I've been writing this whole time, so expect more stuff like this. This is the most recent thing that I've written, so let's just work our way back from here. Love you guys.
All credentialed media, you need to get back into the designated media area. All credentialed media, you need to return to the media area near the command post.